Welcome back. Dan Loepp is the president and CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan here. I want to talk about the ACA. You know, in the earlier segment, you talked about the role that leaders can play here. The Affordable Care Act and Blue Cross's transition to that and where we are now, because we still have a lot of people who don't have health care.
Yeah, I think what you see, Bankole, we were big, personally and from a company standpoint, we were big proponents of the ACA from the beginning when it was first proposed, and it took 2 years to pass. We brought down the uninsured rate, but it's still too high. I think during the COVID, we put a lot of people went on Medicaid, which then gave people coverage as well. So
Right.
in the last 30 years, probably in the last 18 months, you've had the least amount of uninsured people. But the truth of the matter is there shouldn't be anybody uninsured. I mean, to me, is ridiculous. And so we're always trying to find products and ways to, we do a lot of work in Washington and in Lansing around, public health issues and coverage issues. Because if you've got coverage enough that you can go to a primary care doc, or your kids can go to a primary care doc, and you do it once a year. First of all, you find stuff that if you don't go, you don't find it until sometimes it's too late. And you keep people healthier. And over a 8 or 10 or 12-year period, it makes a big difference. And not only on the public health and on the health of the individual, the cost of health care. Because if you're healthy and you're not going in because your heart went, or cancer, or whatever, you pick it, the cost of those high issues, whether it's heart disease, whether it's strokes, any of that stuff, really impacts the cost of health care. And the ACA has gone a long way in helping things, but it's still too much of a political issue to me. I mean, the fact that everybody has I believe, has the right to health care. I happen to think the private sector does a better job of administrating that and working with government. I know other people think differently, and I respect that. I just don't happen to think that way.
Right.
And people want the card. And if you look at Medicaid, for example, we went into Medicaid probably 7 or 8 years, 10 years ago, almost, just after the ACA. And the fact that somebody on Medicare, who is generally poor, because that's how you qualify,
Right.
they have the same, if they have a Blue Cross Medicaid coverage, they have the same card in their wallet or their purse as I do. And when you talk to people, and I do that, is the pride that they have of being covered, not with a paper card, but with the same card that I have, empowers people. And if I think over my career, the things that we've done, getting into Medicaid was a really important step for people to see that we're committed to the entire public health.
Right. And there are people who are saying, well, I hear what you're saying, Mr. Loepp, but still, even with the ACA, with the Medicaid, we still have a huge gap of people out there who, if something happens to them now, they can't get a doctor on the phone. They have to go to an emergency room and pray that, in fact, that the line is not so long where somebody can get to them.
Well, the avoiding the emergency room is, I agree with you. I mean, it's people have that issue, and it's probably worse now than it's been. It's tough on the hospitals.
Yeah. What do you think needs to be done?
Well, I think, one of the things we're doing is we're doing a lot of outreach. And it's amazing what people don't know. And so if we're communicating with people, we talk to our Medicaid recipients, the people that have the Blue Cross Medicaid card, we're in constant contact with them. Did you get your test? Did you go here? We have very adequate networks. We got a lot of docs. We have virtually 95, 97% of the docs in our networks, and almost 100% of the hospitals. So access, if you're in the Blue Cross world of Michigan, is really basically as good as anywhere you could get it in Michigan. But we got to continue to work in Washington, because there's a huge schism on whether people think you have the right to health care or you don't. It's amazing when you talk to people. But I think we're making progress. But I can't say things are great. I mean, because I know that there are people are still suffering and can't get access, even if they have coverage. Getting access to those docs, those hospitals, and I think when I talk to people, mothers and fathers, it is especially acute when they, their own kids can't get access, which is to me unconscionable.
Yeah. So I want to flip this to the corporate boardroom, if you will. When we, there are things that happen in our community where people expect CEOs to take a stand. They expect business leaders to take a position. I want to talk about in the context of the voting rights issue that came up as my inbox was flooded with that. But talk about what you see as the appropriate role here of CEOs. Should, is there a time when business leaders should step back, or should they be involved in the issues that are defining this age? We have
taken, we've been pretty aggressive around public policy, period. And I'm not bashful. And so I speak out. I think the only thing you got to watch a little bit is people taking advantage for their own causes to try to create a reality that doesn't exist. You can't, when you're CEO, you can't pick one party. It just doesn't work that way. I mean, if you look, for example, at our employee base, it's 10,000, 12,000 employees. Probably 55 or 60% of them are Democrats, but there's probably 35 or 40% of them are Republicans. And so you always have to be, but on the other hand, taking, I had no issue taking on the whole, all the things that happened in that 2-year period, George Floyd being front and center, but there were a lot more than that. And, and your employees want you to do that. They want to know that you're paying attention to their community and that you're not afraid to speak out. Now, am I front and center on everything? Am I the go-to person that everybody wants to talk to? Sometimes, but not necessarily. And I've been empowered by my board to be able to speak up about public policy issues. And sometimes I get myself in trouble a little bit. But I would rather be out there and aggressive, taking a stand, than being a church mouse. I don't think our employees expect that. When you're, especially on public health issues, we can't just sit by the sidelines. I mean, we're covering 5 million people in the state of Michigan. For us not to be the advocate for you pick it on the public health scene, we need to do that. And we're viewed, I think, generally as an honest broker. We've got a lot of information. We work with both sides of the aisle. I mean, I grew up in Democratic politics, so that is.
You walked in Lansing, so you were once an insider.
I was once an insider. That's true, and now I'm. It's been 25 years, and it's amazing. How time flies. I worked as Curtis Hertel's, who's another East Sider, God rest his soul. He was Speaker of the House, and I was his Chief of Staff. That was we had a great run. It was interesting. You can make a difference. Once you see that you can make a difference, you don't want to stop making a difference. I don't know how,
So and I'm thinking that this notion of making a difference, there's this evolving philosophy about ethical capitalism. That business leaders and their companies must engage in ethical business.
Right.
And, and I go back to my earlier question. I mean, there are folk who say, well, I understand the ethics, but, we were not, hired, we were not appointed to run, a company that goes by the dictates of Pope Francis. How does that play, in where you sit as a CEO of Blue Cross?
My belief is that it's not an either or.
Okay.
You've got a business to run. Right. You have to run it, but you can, in that running of the business, there's things that you can do that are for the public good. Yeah. And that it's not an either or. It's not like I told you, we're a nonprofit mutual. And I'm not forced by my board to make a 6% margin. I don't have to.
Okay.
We don't want to.
Yeah.
We're looking at giving things back. I mean, we've got...
So you don't have a deadline to meet where you have to...
Other than knowing that you got to run a successful business.
Yeah,
But then
well,
what's
yeah.
the definition of a successful business? I would say, you know, if we could make a 1 or 2% margin, that's plenty.
Okay.
And then we end up spending an awful lot of money on public good issues.
Right.
Whether it's free clinics, whether it's through our foundation, we have we give away $5-6 million a year in grants.
Yeah.
And do a lot of, you know, the things that were involved in the community. So I don't believe it's like, well, you either have to be totally philanthropic or you pay no attention to it. I just don't believe you have to do it that way, and we don't.
Yeah, you know, I was reading an article way back in the Harvard Business Review that talks about just the fact that conscientious companies and business leaders who have a conscience and who know how to engage and have social responsibility at the center of their businesses will succeed because it reflects in their workforce as well.
There's no doubt about it. I think people are very proud to work for us because they see, and we communicate well with our employees, so they know what I'm doing, what we're doing, and I think generally they're proud of it. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, one of the things we do, and sounds trivial, but the feedback I get from our employee base is really wild, is during Thanksgiving week, we send a memo home and said, well, when you're around a kitchen table, here's a bunch of public health issues that you're going to get asked about, so here's your briefing document. It's unbelievable how many people tell me, you know what, I had this, I was able to explain things to people and talk about all the things that we're doing at Blue Cross. Well, that makes people feel proud of what we do and what they do, for that matter.
Right.
And I think it's part of being a good company, honestly.
All right. Thank you so much for being here.
Bankole, thank you. It's always a pleasure.
All right. Don Loepp is the president and CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, Michigan's largest insurer. We'll be right back with more on Sunday Nation.